Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Puppet Masters and Castle Freaks, the internet's leading all things Charles Band podcast. I am one of your grape-hating hosts, Jared Hornbeck, coming to you from Brooklyn, New York. And I don't know if these exist, but I'm curious. Are there any manicurists who make house calls around? Anyone who can join me at this moment?
Well, absolutely there is, because I'm Steve Guntley, and I invite you to eat my taco of love, because this is the podcast about nipple plungers, diet slice, and absolutely no grapes, because this is a podcast about psychos in love, a gory dark comedy from the wild, wild west days of Wizard distribution. And holy shit, what a movie. Cannot wait to get into the meat of this, but we have a guest here who is perfectly suited to help us navigate this insane little treasure of a movie. Jared, who's with us today?
Well, when I was scouring through, the depths and the dumpster and the barrels to find a person suitable to talk about this movie with us, I thought, who is more grimy NYC low budget movie than Mr. HorrorBoobs himself, Matt Desiderio. Matt, thank you for taking the time and joining us today, man.
I'll take it. That's appreciated, man. I don't mind being in the gutter. I guess that's where I belong.
Oh, hey, you know what? You brought this movie from the gutter to our attention. A movie that I had never heard of before. Like, I didn't even realize it was fully on our list. I mean, so we're kind of breaking format a little bit with this one, because so far we've talked strictly about like movies that Charles Band produced. So it's Full Moon Features, Moonstone, Torchlight, Empire Films, all things that he had a very personal hand in distributing. But today we're talking about Wizard Video, which is one of his earlier ventures where he's basically just buying things that existed that already are out there and just don't have a home and giving it distribution. It's
giving them a home in a really large VHS box.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, a big old honking box.
That's what I remember about those Wizard videos specifically, was those boxes that they came in. But you're right, Steve. We are breaking format a little bit. But Matt, I thought you would be the perfect guest for this well, to the show in general, I should say. Now we'll get into a little bit why you chose this episode. But I mean, you've opened my eyes to some amazing stuff as the curator of Visual Vengeance. I mean, I've been to a bunch of those, and, we've chatted at them before, and you turned me on to some Polonia joints, and you turned me on to, Trash Cans of Terror and Blood-Sucking Freaks and these things. And like, it's outstanding. So make sure at some point, while you're talking about your relationship with horror movies, exploitation, and all of that stuff, like, talk a little bit too about how you got started doing the Visual Vengeance stuff, because for anybody in the tri-state area, come out to Nighthawk in Brooklyn and check out Visual Vengeance at some point. So definitely tell us a little bit about that in your story. And so where did this all like start for you? Because you've introduced me to some stuff, and I've seen you post other things too, where I'm like, you seem to be this like wealth of just trash knowledge, and I mean that in the most complimentary way possible.
I honestly feel like I don't have to talk. You guys seem to know your stuff, and I'm a little scared about that. But that's how it goes nowadays. I've been around these types of movies for a long time. I'm a big fan of movies. I'm a lifelong video store kid, and most of my obsession with all of this stuff comes from the fact that I think it's because I worked at a video store in the city when I was a teenager into my early 20s. And it was like an adult shop on 8th Avenue that was half like porno, half, regular movies. So I would dig in and, just watch movies all day. And that's where I got my real roots, my real schooling on this type of stuff, I feel. I mean, not that I wasn't renting videos always as a kid, but being a clerk, it changes everything. So I don't know where to start, man. Like, you guys asked me to talk about full moon movies, and I was like, oh man, I have a million things I'd love to talk about, because I'm a big fan of Charles Band. And I was like, we should do this movie Crash, where he is an early film for him with a possessed car, or which I'm obsessed with. Or I was like, you know, what if we talk about Arcade, because there's supposedly 2 versions of it out there. Or, you know, I have this other film that's called like Day Traders in the Fifth Dimension, which is like a home video that was made only for staff members of Full Moon. And
that's amazing. I didn't know about this.
Yeah, it's like something I got from a buddy of mine, and it's literally a bunch of people at work there meet up with some of the demonic toys and like run around in like the sets and stuff.
I would love to somehow get a copy of this thing.
Yeah, this sounds cool. It sounds like Full Moon Duck-a-Muck. Like, this sounds great.
Yeah, there's so much stuff to talk about, man. I love Charles Band. I'm a big fan. You know, the fact that he is a video store legend, like making videos. He started Media Home Video as Meta Home Video, and was one of the first in the game. He did Wizard Video, which, you know, the titles on Wizard Video, I'm sure they're on your list, right? Or no, maybe not. Like you were saying that you think that this is one of the few videos that they picked up. I mean, Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
I Spit on Your Grave. That was an early one too.
Grave. These are massive Charles Band pickups. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the cool thing about Wizard Video in particular, and we can kind of get into it now if we want. Wizard Video, or Wizard Distribution, however you want to call it, became, you know, this sort of sprung out of Charles Band's 1970s fixation on like self-preserving movies. Like he wrote in his autobiography that he used to hang out with Roddy McDowall back in the 70s, and Roddy introduced him to this idea of like preserving films. Roddy was buying all these movies, these old film canisters, and then keeping them in his basement, preserving them and transferring them to other media as they were going. So between Charles Band and Roddy McDowall, they probably saved hundreds of like grindhouse B movies, which is pretty amazing. And so Charles Band started Wizard Video as kind of a way of giving distribution, like home video distribution, to some of these really obscure little films, because a lot of these strong, you know, they were being produced like by shoestring budgets, like for the 70s. They were being shown at drive-ins like maybe once or twice, and then kind of being dustbinned, you know, because these movies did not have any kind of critical acclaim or reputation as anything other than sort of, you know,
you were describing
sleazy.
that, Steve, and I was picturing in my head, and it's going to drive me crazy that I can't think of it off the top of my head, but what's the one with Joe Namath in it?
Oh, I don't know. What is the one with Joe Namath?
There's a really, I always think of the trailer. It's like so silly that he's like, he plays like a motorcycle gang guy or something in it, and it's just the fact that it's Joe Namath. While we continue to talk, I'll bring it up in my phone at some point.
Yeah, I have
maybe
no idea what this is.
I'm like, through the magic of editing, maybe
I have no idea what this is.
Make it look like I came up with this on my own.
It's good to know that you edit these things. Thank you. I'm appreciative.
Oh, I'm leaving all this in. Yeah, no,
okay.
absolutely. Yeah.
The movie is called CC and Company, and he plays
CC and Company.
And he plays a character named CC Ryder.
That's a great name. Is it
and
Ryder with a Y?
Right off of it's a C. and Company. He plays CC Ryder, and the movie came out in 1970, right on the heels, I should say, of Easy Rider.
Interesting. Okay, CC Rider.
Yeah,
Easy
it's a really
Rider,
silly trailer. So at some point after this, check it out.
Okay, absolutely.
You know, it's funny, Matt, this movie, and Steve mentioned before having never seen this movie or never having heard of it. I actually had never heard of this movie either until you brought it up. And I don't know how, given my background, like I would do the same thing. I would peruse the video store shelves. My friend Steve and I would look for the dumbest looking stuff we could find, basically. We would just the craziest looking boxes, cases. And then I would sit at home and a lot of this was like pre-internet or internet in its infancy anyway. I would read like Michael J. Weldon's Psychotronic Film Guide and Psychotronic Encyclopedia.
Man. Don't get me started. Those are some of the best, but also some of the funniest, because you can tell he makes some of it up and he didn't really watch the movie, or he forgot about it and he was just like, let me fill it out. You know, there's tons of like reviews in the Psychotronic that are bullshit, and I love that about it.
at
Yeah, I would
all.
just read the titles of movies and little synopsis and be like, "Oh my God, I need to seek this out." And there were movies I never would have found otherwise. I think like Meet the Feebles, I remember when it
Oh
first
yeah,
came out, reading the description of it and being like, "This can't be real." I mean,
yeah.
I didn't really know much about who Peter Jackson was yet at the time, but I think then I found Meet the Feebles, and then I found Dead Alive, and then I found Bad Taste. I worked backwards through that, but that was what this kind of resource was like because we didn't have IMDb or something to just pull up and look at that. And I don't know how Psychos in Love eluded me to this point. I was getting angry with myself watching the movie that it wasn't a staple of all of the like, you know, crazy parties and horror movie nights and things that I would have with my friends because
I
100% this would have been on in the background.
this
Well,
is cult within cult. This
it's a
is yeah,
victim of having been on VHS only for a very long time
yeah.
until Media Blasters put it out on DVD in like the mid 2000s, where DVD was already kind of, you know, on the way out, where people less and less people gave a shit, and you know, it just never came out at the right time. Um,
Yeah,
and
there
I think it's still going to be like going over people's heads for years. It's one of those movies that if you see it, if it gets on your radar and you get a chance to watch it, you might just fall in love with it because I did, you know.
it's definitely
And
it's still kind of hard to find. Like we were able to track it down on a Midnight Pulp, which is, you know, a more obscure streaming service for a lot of people. And that's really kind of the only place it is. There was a restored DVD released by Vinegar Syndrome in like 2017 that I really wish I tracked it down before we recorded this episode so I could listen to some of those bonus features, because this is definitely a movie that made me want to know absolutely everything about how it was made and how this came around and who these wild people are. And Jarrett was telling me you have an association with some of the people involved in the making of this movie. Is that right?
oh well, I mean, when I like a movie, sometimes like I become obsessed with it and like, you know,
Sure.
want to talk to the people who made it. Obviously, you know, it's one of those things that uh I guess whatever you want to call the type of fan that I am is, you know, I'm going to put a positive spin on it, but it's hard to. Um, I I just sometimes contact the people involved in the movie, and you know, I have a reason at least sometimes, like whether I'm booking a signing at Forbidden Planet, which is my day job, or if I want to book a screening in New York somewhere, which is something I do for fun through Horror Boobs now, and that's kind of what Horror Boobs evolved into, is more of a name that I use when I book screenings.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I used to do VHS tapes more often. When I first started, I was putting movies out, and that was kind of fun. Um, but now I work for a company that puts out movies called Visual Vengeance, and you know me from mostly from those screenings recently that we've been meeting at.
Mhm.
Um, which are all screenings that I put together that feature films by the label that I work for. That's kind of where I am in the mix with all this type of stuff, and why I validate my reaching out to these people.
Yeah.
So I I think the first time I tried to reach out to Carmen Capobianco, who's the writer of this film, was through a website he had where he was doing graphic design for people. Um, it was pretty funny. He was like offering to turn people's like photos into like 3D photos and stuff like that. Um, you know, whatever, if it's something he was doing at the time. And I I mentioned that you know, Capobianco is a name that runs in my family, and that I'm a big fan of his, and you know, maybe we're related, and that you know, we should talk about this. And you know, he never wrote back to me. But then I met this other kid, James Balsamo. Do you know who that is?
No.
Not by name. No.
He's a filmmaker who makes like these movies at conventions, like where he gets like whoever's at the conventions in the film and then like releases them like uh I don't even know how to explain that. It's kind of like an old chiller thing. I don't know. But
Okay.
he's made a living out of it. If you can call it a living. I don't know what it is that he does with it. But he releases them. But I was in one of the very first ones because he told me that he was going to have Carmine Capobianco, and I said, I want to meet Carmine Capobianco. He walked into Forbidden Planet with one of his movies, and I said I would sell it. And that's what I do. If you come into Forbidden Planet with your movie, I'll probably buy some and put it on the shelf, because you have to, as a fan of New York and places like Kim's Video or old video stores, I like being able to have a platform for this type of stuff. So
Yeah, and if you're ever in New York, like, you should just go to Forbidden Planet anyway, because I feel like it's sort of a rite of passage when you're here. Like, you got to go to Forbidden Planet if this stuff that we're talking about like interests you at all in any way.
Yeah, we sell the entire Full Moon catalog.
You really do.
Yeah, we sell. We have a direct relationship with Full Moon, and we order direct from them.
That's amazing.
We get their puppets and all that stuff.
I know. Every time I walk in, I see, like, I'm not much of a collector of things. Like, I just started getting into physical media again recently, and I love having books on subjects, but like, I'm not much of like a figure collector, and I always see these Full Moon toys and stuff there, and I'm like, man, like, I really want to start splurging on these things and have them displayed somewhere. So I want to get into like how
you read all 3 of the Full Moon books that came out.
So I read It Came from the Video Aisle, and I read Confessions of a Puppet Master, and Steve have read It Came from the Video Aisle too, which is sort of how the show started. Was that he and I were talking about how we had read the book, and then the autobiography had just come out or was coming out, and we were like, oh, we should get that and read that because it's Charles Band. The stories are probably crazy. What's the 3rd book?
Is it Nat Bremer's Puppet Master Guide?
No, Empire of the Bees. All the Empire.
Oh,
okay. Well, I gotta get that one now.
Well, I'm adding it to the short list.
Put that in. Yeah, put that on my Christmas wish list right now.
Oh, absolutely. Let me backtrack for just a minute here and kind of let our audience know what this movie is and sort of how it came about.
Fire off some stats, because
I'm gonna want to hear so many stories off of this. But Psychos in Love was made sometime in 1986, released sometime in 1987. It's hard to get an exact date on this movie. It's directed by Gorman Bechard, and it's written by Bechard and Carmine Capobianco, and it stars Carmine Capobianco, Debbie, say it again, Thibault,
Frank
Stewart, Angela Nichols, and Eric Lutz. So we talked a little bit about Wizard Video, and Wizard is particularly unique amongst the Charles Band filmography because this is where you get the sleaziest, grimiest stuff that Charles Band ever really associates his name with, I would say, right? Like, Full Moon feels a little scrubbed and safe compared to this, and Empire was sort of his mainstream play. He really wanted Empire to compete with the big boys. But Wizard Video, it kept it down and dirty, which it's a great repository for a lot of movies like that. They were able to save a ton of movies, including a couple of very important ones. For example, I Spit on Your Grave, Pink Flamingos, Driller Killer, Zombie, and of course, the most important one that we earlier mentioned, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, whose distributor had gone bankrupt. And that movie's still kind of in a weird, like, distribution black hole. Like, I don't really know who owns the rights to Texas Chainsaw anymore. I think it's MGM or UA, something like that. I don't know. I could be wrong about that. But yeah, so Wizard was also responsible for Band's one and only foray into video games. We covered this a little bit on my other show, Cinema Arcade, because he made 2 video games for the Atari 2600 in 1983 based on movies that he owned the rights to. One of them was Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The other was Halloween. The idea was that so far the video game market had solely been catering to kids, and he thought like this had potential to have crossover to appeal to adults. So we wanted to do something a little edgier and a little harder. Parents complained horribly that these games were too violent and too shocking. And if you look at the games themselves, that's a
You
pretty
can't even
hilarious
tell
thing
what's
to
happening.
claim. It is a hilarious thing to say.
Imagine a Psychos in Love game, but like Pac-Man with grapes.
Absolutely. Oh my God. And they just, every time you eat a big grape, you get angrier and angrier and you kill a bunch of people.
Yeah, you can go after and eat people.
I mean, that'd be so good. Yeah, that was about the
Trademark
end of
that.
Wizard Video. They only lasted they went down with Empire, you know, so they never really got to finish it out. But this movie is about as cult gets, as far as I'm concerned. It's a teeny tiny little indie film that pushes all the boundaries of good taste. I texted Jared when we were watching it that this is John Waters meets Annie Hall, and that's kind of the vibe that you're going for, like with a heap and helping of like fourth wall breaking, like meta commentary.
This movie is Annie Hall with a somehow less monstrous lead character.
Somehow, yeah, far less monstrous.
Well, Carmen was a huge Woody Allen fan. He was also a huge Marx Brothers fan.
You can
there's some vaudeville type bits in it that I wasn't expecting to, and I'll tell you, I mean, we can get into some specific scenes as we go along, but I laughed so hard at there. It was a very Woody Allen type scene. And I made that joke. I'm joking. I'm finding it as I'm getting older, it's harder to separate art from the artist with Woody Allen. But Annie Hall was a movie I loved for a long time in my life.
Well, then why are you doing a podcast about the Charles Band in Full Moon? You know?
Yeah.
Hey, we have layers.
Yeah, really. But the scene when it's one of the scenes where he's breaking the fourth wall and talking to the camera, and it's when he's doing the different takes for the line reading of "What a Woman."
Oh yeah,
when he does the "What a woman," like with the question, I fucking lost it. I was
sometimes
laughing
I
so
find
hard.
myself saying that in real life all the time. Like, you know, catch myself just, you know, in a "What a woman" kind of, you know, soliloquy, and I'm like, oh my God, you know, that's how like much Psychos in Love is like ingrained in me, like, you know.
That's amazing. I'm hoping it's going to have a similar effect on me. A little bit about these filmmakers here: Carmine Capobianco and Gorman Bechard. They're both from Waterbury, Connecticut. They met just out of college in 1984, and they decided to form a film company together. Their first movie was called Disconnected. I haven't seen that one. I don't know if that one's available anywhere, but
well, Vinegar Syndrome also put that out on
they did.
Blu-ray. Yeah. So.
Amazing. Okay. I want to check that one out for sure. That one didn't make a super huge splash, but they were able to scrape together $75,000 to make this movie as their follow-up. I don't know when this was screened or how this was shown, but it got in front of Charles Band at one point, who loved it, and he agreed to distribute their film company. Their company is called Generic Films, and he agreed to distribute the next 4 Generic films. I believe they got to make 2 of those. Galactic Gigolo and Cemetery High were both distributed by Wizard Video, and then the company went out of business, so they couldn't finish out the rest of their contract. But Capobianco, he would take on a few more small parts and work in like little indie films every now and then. But mostly he made his living off of, he was the owner of 2 video stores in Waterbury, Connecticut. And he was like a family man. He was married, had 3 daughters. And we did lose him a couple years ago, sadly. I think we lost him in 2021 after a fight with cancer. But so that's very sad. And Gorman Bechard is still working, as near as I can tell. He's he does a lot of music documentaries and still.
Yeah, I was gonna say his name to me was I associated it with that Replacements documentary.
Right. Yeah.
I know he was very involved in.
That was big for him for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gorman, so Matt, you kind of became like friends a little bit with Carmine Capobianco, like through the shooting of this movie. Is that right?
Well, through the shooting of that silly James Balsamo movie, we met and hit it off, and then kept in touch. And you know, he would come visit me at the store, or we'd meet up at Chiller or at conventions and hang out. Or, you know, I had him at the store for a couple of signings. You know, we were buds. You know, and it led to me setting up some screenings for the movie and having them all out and doing Q&As and you know, signings and, you know, after parties like I do at Nighthawk. So, we became close, and it was a total bummer when he passed, because I literally had just texted him and was like, didn't get a response, and it was so uncommon and it was so weird, and then like a week later I found out he'd passed, and I was like, oh my God, that's everything makes sense, but like he was like that type of guy, like, he always, was positive and had something good to say. Nothing was ever going to be said negative about Carmen. He was a really funny character.
Well, that's amazing. I mean,
yeah.
he's clearly got a really fascinating like mind based on the script that they concocted here. Like you said, it is a perfect mix of Woody Allen and the Marx Brothers, and then just unfettered gore. Like it reminded me of like a comedy version of Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer in places. It reminded
Oh,
me
that's
of,
a good description. I
because
didn't
it's
I didn't
similar.
get there myself, but yeah.
I mean, that just occurred to me like just now, because I was thinking of movies that don't necessarily have a plot per se. They're kind of just a series of killings sort of dispassionately shot, but like here they're all it's more of like a joke, like a punchline setup
Right. This is
kind of
like if the
setup.
Marx Brothers directed In Cold Blood.
Yeah, there's shtick here, there's
Well,
goofiness here, like yeah.
some stuff that I just wanted to mention that you had actually left out, because I
Oh
really
yeah,
loved
please.
how great and researched your thing was. But Gorman and Carmen had worked on a couple of movies, trying to get movies made between Disconnected and Psychos in Love, and actually made one shot on video feature called And Then, that was shot that was only shown on television. And
Oh,
yeah, Carmen won a Best Supporting Actor award for that from Laurel Cablevision. And I begged him for years to show it to me, and he never would.
he never would. Oh no.
Yeah, it's like a total drama. They said it's like, they said it's not funny or gory or anything. They were just like, yeah, they were like, you don't want to see that.
And he still had the tape, he still had access to them.
They have one. They have
Okay.
one. Yeah,
Oh,
they
that's
definitely
amazing.
have a copy. There's no way. But yeah, Psychos is just like inevitable that they took what they did with Disconnected, which was like kind of make this like kind of noir-esque horror thing, and amp it up with the comedy. And they had Charles Band at the time release it, which became this legendary feud between Gorman and Charles, because Gorman's like one of the few guys that talked out negatively, which is really funny, because he didn't give a shit. He ended up with Psychos in Love back, and he lost the other movies, but he didn't care because he wasn't happy with those movies anyway. The movies he made after Psychos in Love, obviously, for
Yeah.
For Empire. Yeah, for Wizard Video
for Wizard
distribution.
Video.
It's a consistent thing we run across with like people when they talk about Charles Band. It's always like charming guy. I really like him. His business practices are shady and slipshod, and like not shady necessarily, but like it's all very last minute pieced together. You never quite know where your money's coming from or what the distribution's going to be.
There's a great video I once saw of both Charles Band and Lloyd Kaufman at like I think it was Cinema Wasteland, and even like Lloyd Kaufman's calling Charles Band a scam artist.
I mean, yeah, and the band himself will admit to that as much. Yeah,
yeah, I love Charles Band. I think he's awesome. I think
he's
one of the most important people in home video and genre cinema. He's one of the coolest, in my opinion. I think he did some really sick stuff.
Steve and I talked about this, where like Full Moon, and I mean Empire maybe not as much, because your Reanimators, From Beyond, like I know I was more aware of those ones. Those made more of an impact on me younger, but I wasn't a person who really rented a ton of Full Moon movies when I was young. A lot of them, even the ones I've seen a lot of times, I discovered in adulthood. So like we haven't covered Head of the Family on the show yet. but Head of the Family is one of my like favorite full moon movies, but not because I saw it when it came out in 96. I saw it probably 10, 12 years after that, but I've seen it a bunch of times. But like we there was just something in about the company once I started to put a face to all these things that made me want to go back and read. It came from the video aisle, even though I didn't have the nostalgia so much attached to it. And reading those stories and the stuff that went into making those movies, I was like, I started to get this real profound respect for Charles Band as a business person and as a creative type and just as a mogul, if you want to call him that. And then I was just like the way he does business in some of these stories, it's like maybe there's some embellishment going on, obviously. And then the Confessions of a Puppet Master book was coming out, and I was like, well, I have to read this book because I'm sure that now this is coming straight from Charles Band. There's going to be some anachronistic stories or different versions of things or heightened drama in certain ways. And so, yeah, he's been such an amazing person to read about. And it's like we're doing the show, and I'm retroactively going back and some of it are titles I've heard of or VHS boxes I remember seeing, but I didn't watch. And so it's really fun to like take this sort of backwards journey and like look at some of the stuff from like full moons, like classic period, like until maybe a couple of years ago, maybe when I started reading, it came from the video aisle. I had never rented like Dark Angel, The Ascent, and now
Oh,
I've
that's a good
seen.
one.
I know, and now I'm like, I can't wait till we get to that episode because I really want to talk about that movie. And then I made the mistake of in some spare time popping on other movies, like not the ones we have queued up for the episodes. And I'm like, every time I'm like, this is a mistake because now this one's fresh in my mind. And
Yeah.
I'm looking at our spreadsheet and it's like 75 weeks from now.
Yeah.
Who do you got planned for that? Who's going to come on for that?
For
I don't know
Dark
if you have
Angel,
anything.
we're not sure yet. We've got it. We I think we've put it in the movie into the spreadsheet for a date, but we haven't secured our guest yet as of this recording.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
That's
Oh, yeah.
classic. Little Mermaid.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, so let's talk a little bit about this movie and kind of how it came about because
Well-
yeah. Oh,
Well,
sorry,
I
man.
think it's also important if we're talking about Wizard Video that
Oh, yeah.
Psychos in Love is part of the Too Gory for the Silver Screen series.
Oh, this was a series. Okay, I
It's
saw
like
the
a
little badge on the-
subdivision. It's like a
Yeah.
subdivision. They got certain ones got labeled that, and like it kind of made sure you knew that these movies were never in theaters before.
Yeah.
So
This was like the video nasty mark, but for Americans.
Well, no, it's like more like saying, hey, these are these are cheap movies. They're not getting theatrical. They're home video movies. Like you can only get them here only, but really they were at the time, being made like the other kind of movies were Tim Kincaid movies were like Necropolis. No, Necropolis came out later. It was what are
Breeders?
the others? Breeders.
Yeah, Breeders was one of them. Yeah.
Which is great. And Breeders and one other one. Mutant
We'll have to
something. Robot Holocaust.
Robot Holocaust.
Yeah.
One.
We'll have to
there's-
cover all of these on our Tim Kincaid
Yeah.
Patreon series.
Oh, you're yeah. That's
We should
We're
definitely
not
do
there
that.
yet, but
yeah. The subdivisions of Tim Kincaid full moon features, that would be funny. But yeah, they were mostly the Tim Kincaid things. I think can't remember, maybe Headless Eyes had it, which would make no sense because that it played theatrically. But anyway, yeah, this was one of those Too Gory for the silver screens, and it had an amazing cover. It really had one of the coolest covers ever. It's like a painting of a bride in her gown and a husband in his tuxedo, and they have weapons and they're killing each other and their heads are getting chopped off, and it's pink, and it's really eye-catching. But it died at the video store. People weren't really into things like this back then. People aren't really into this type of stuff now. Even they're confused. They're like, is this horror? Is this comedy? Is this like, what is this going on? Why are they talking to me? I'm confused.
My favorite moment was when the boom mic came down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, I'll full disclosure, I'll just come right out and say it. Like I had an absolute blast with this movie.
Yeah.
I do think at 85 minutes or however long it was, I do think there are a couple times where it is sort of like a single joke stretched a little bit thin. Like this could have benefited maybe from being 75 minutes, but I'm not really gonna like nitpick too much about it because I had so much fun with it. But I can totally understand this being divisive among people. Like this is not the kind of thing that if someone was like, oh, I really dislike Psychos in Love, I wouldn't like necessarily try to debate them on it. I would maybe like, oh, that's interesting. Like, what is it about it? And what they're going to describe is maybe what's endearing to me about it. And so we're just not going to agree. And I feel like that's going to be the case. But this is one now. It's like I said, I wish I had discovered this movie 20 years ago, because this would be one that we would put on at a party, and I would just wait for people to say, please tell me what movie this is so that I can find it. And I would probably, like you said earlier, Matt, I would be quoting it. There's moments in it with some of the monologues and things, and some of the descriptions of the girls when he repeats them. It's just really funny, and I would probably be quoting those too. But here we are, and I didn't get a chance to connect with this growing up, but I love it now.
You're on board now.
I'm retconning my own personal history.
I'm with you entirely. Yeah, I think that's kind of my exact take on it too. Like, because it's yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, it's 85, 88 minutes, somewhere in there, and that does feel a little thin for just, there's really almost no structure of a plot here. Like they kind of tease you in like almost the last 5-10 minutes of the movie with a plot involving like the Frank the Cannibal plumber. It's like, okay, maybe this is in a more conventional movie would introduce this much sooner, have these characters meet each other, and then he's blackmailing them to go out and kill people for him. And now we have like sort of a driving engine of the plot. They introduce that very late into this movie and then immediately dismiss it in a way that feels like this really does feel very different from anything else that we've watched on this show so far, because everything else is tinged with Charles Band's quest for respectability. He wants, in the Empire Age especially, he really wanted to be able to compete on the same stage as like some of the big guys, or at least at the same stage as like canon films.
Charles Band is Marvel with tits.
That's exactly
he literally wants to be that. Like he has one goal, and you could see a Charles Band movie. That's why there's only a few movies in the catalog that are like these kind of like, what the fuck kind of movies, and Psychos in Love is one of them. And then there's most of Wizard Video is pickups for home video, but they kind of still have that Charles Band touch in a way,
They do, yeah. It's clearly like curated. It's not so much just like things that you couldn't imagine him going near. It is stuff that would definitely have appeal for a guy like this. But Wizard feels so much more like I don't want to say outsider art, but like it has that kind of element to it. Where it's sort of anything goes. They're going to be very non-formal with the structure. They're going to be, like I read one review that said like the movie was pretty loose on the reins for the first 45 minutes, and then the last 40 it just lets them go. Like the movie goes increasingly meta, increasingly strange. And I mean, there's one moment kind of towards the end of the movie after they're butchering somebody where they get grossed out by the amount of gore that's on screen. So they pan over to the special effects team and see them like giddily pumping fake blood all over everything. And we're seeing the boom mic and the camera operator, and they're just like, guys, cool it. Like, just calm it down. They start referencing earlier scenes by like specific scene numbers and doing all this stuff like that. And there's just something a little thrilling about seeing something that even on this really low budget with almost no audience, they're taking these big, weird artistic risks, because why the fuck not? If you're going to do this movie, do the movie, man. Just
giddy is a good word.
Yeah.
You use the word giddy, and I think that really works. I think it works because the people involved all seem to have this quirky energy that they're putting into this thing to make it as oddball as possible. And then there's moments in the movie that are so, I guess, like, when you think about that it was done, you're like, okay, well, this is probably not uncommon, but I didn't expect it. Like, multiple times there is like almost a shot for shot remake our scene in Psycho.
Well, that's in every movie, I feel. I
Right.
feel like they, but it just shows that they're fans of both comedy and horror. They know their stuff. They're Psycho fans. There's homage to Friday the 13th. They're fans of these type of movies as well as the comedies and dramas. I think they're just well-rounded filmmakers, which is not something common in the Charles Band staple, but that's beyond the point. The I don't know. There are a lot of great people in this movie, and there are people that like kind of end up in other full moon movies too, because I think they were all just making movies in New York at the time, because there's this girl Leanne Baker in this film. She's a heavy metal girl who like wants to get like down, and they're just like she's in some of those Tim Kincaid movies. She's like the main girl in the Necropolis that has multiple breasts. Have you seen that yet?
No, not yet.
That's a classic Charles Bander. Yeah, there's some people, there's some really cool people in this. Ruth Collins is the girl who gets her head cut off and ends up being the plate of
oh yeah, the centerpiece.
fruit.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
centerpiece of the table. She's been in a bunch of stuff, especially
Correct me if I'm wrong, Matt. Was Angela Nicholas, did she go on to be like an adult film star?
I have no idea. I'm not sure who's that. Who did she
She's the
play?
first girl. She's when he's like, I met Diane, and they mislead you into thinking
Behind
that,
and they
yeah, and
Oh,
then
I see. Yeah.
she's the one that he kills in the shower scene.
I'm not sure. Maybe
That's a funny moment too, because he gives the same introduction. It's like a great fake out scene of like, this is gonna be our lead girl. Like, she's beautiful, she's stunning, but she likes grapes. Slow, like immediate psycho murder scene. She's dead. He goes on a long rant to the camera about how much he hates grapes. And then we actually meet the real girl that's going to be the lead of this movie, but he sets her up the exact same way, like the same framing,
It's
same
really
outfit.
funny.
It's very, very funny. I mean, I think the closest thing this movie has to like an actual, mission statement or an actual like, more not moral, but you know what I mean. Like, it's my favorite scene in the movie. It's where they go to the video store and the clerk is just giving them this insane long list of like slashers. He's giving them every Friday movie that's available at the time, every Halloween movie available, all these other like obscure films all in a theme, and they transfer their love of killing people into a love of watching horror movies, on VHS, because video is the future, And I thought that was going to be like where the movie left off, where it's just like, oh, we don't need to killing people anymore. We've discovered the movies, and now you have too,
I want one of those I love my VCR stickers.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Oh, definitely. Yeah. No, I mean, I love that they include that. I mean, really, we are just mostly watching, so our Carmine's character here, Joe, he runs a strip club.
Yeah.
So he has access to a lot of movies, or to a lot of women, even though, as he's described in the movie, that he's pudgy and he looks like Elmer Fudd. I don't know where Elmer Fudd comes from, but
he didn't write that. Gorman wrote that. Actually.
Oh, Gorman wrote that.
Yeah,
Oh, no.
he wrote that line. That's from the song. Although Carmen wrote all the music in the movie.
That's the incredible thing. If you look at the credits, most people have multiple roles.
Oh, forget about it. They all did stuff.
Yeah.
I think maybe Frank did makeup and Debbie might have done costuming. They all were wearing many hats during the production of this film.
We should mention though that he owns a strip club with one dancer, Nikki. I knew Nikki was working because she's the only dancer.
Nikki. I'm sorry, I'm not 100% prepared. Is Nikki?
Cecilia Wilde.
No, see, because she's not the only stripper, because then she's probably just the generic stripper that is in the background, because then he ends up giving that one girl a job who ends up doing her strip, like she keeps putting clothes on during her strip
Yeah.
acts. Her name is Donna Davidge, and she won't shut up. She just keeps talking during the strip act, and then eventually Carmen goes to take her out, and she keeps talking through the whole thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the one girl that I think of that works at the strip club, the girl who puts her clothes back on.
Yeah, I think it was a gag in the beginning where he's saying that they have one dancer there. But yeah, this movie, yeah, it's so funny because when you look at it and you break it down, like you said, Steve, there's not really much of like a plot or a semblance of really any like linear narrative, other than there's a bunch of scenes of these two kind of getting together, killing each other again, like as if like, you know, something from like the Honeymoon Killers meets like Pink Flamingos,
Yeah.
you know, meets like Henny Youngman's like you know,
When Harry Met Sally. I mean, this can't be that because it came out before. But
Tight Five, yeah.
I'm willing to bet Nora Ephron watched this movie when she wrote Harry Met Sally. That's going to be my headcanon right now. That Nora Ephron and Rob Reiner were secretly big fans of this movie. It's not impossible. No, but something that's kind of miraculous about this movie is that, yes, it is gross and dirty and kind of roughshod, and it's got a lot of gratuitous nudity and like some graphic violence, and it still manages to be kind of sweet. Like somehow this movie's kind of good-hearted in a weird way. Like this is really just about two people who accept each other and love each other very deeply. Like they both have their specific triggers that have been set off basically by like they're going through the dating grind. And in like, unlike, you know, the rest of humanity where you're just like, oh no, I didn't work out with that person, I'm going to go on another date and hopefully this one will do it. They kill their disappointing first dates. You know, anybody who doesn't really stand up to the standards that they're hoping for. But then just through sheer luck, they find that one person in the world who really gets them and understands them, and even tries to make them a little better. Like they both try to stop killing at one point. Like they kind of lose their taste for it because they're happy and fulfilled in their dating life.
This is a kind-hearted movie to most people, unless you're somebody who is on the Grape Council.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, yeah, I guess it is kind of deep. You know, I always said, like, you know, I'll this is a movie that I showed my wife probably one of the first times we ever hung out. You know what I mean?
Wow.
And
It's a good litmus test for like what a person could withstand.
Yeah, if you're into this, then you're probably, you know, on my wavelength.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, there's just so much like quietly charming stuff in this movie that belies sort of the very lurid exterior of it. You know, and they do like almost a riff on like the Annie Hall lobster scene, you know, where they're sitting around the kitchen and then the boom mic comes into stage and they have to like yell at them to move it. And like and there's clearly like a lot of improv as well, you know, where they're just sort of like letting them riff, and their reactions are much more realistic. I am curious if you ever asked Carmine, did he actually hate grapes?
Oh, yeah, no, they don't hate grapes for real.
I was curious. It just felt very specific to go after grapes. It's like, yeah.
Like, I forget, you know, we did talk about that, but I think it just ended up being a stupid answer of like where they were going back and forth and they can't remember who actually came up with it, and they were like, I need a motivation, and then somebody said, you hate grapes, that's why. and that was it, and he went with it. But yeah, that's the kind of guy Carmen was. He could do a soliloquy, you know, off the top of his head about grapes if he wanted to. He was a wild character in that regard. You know, he was really sharp-witted, and you could never get one over on him. So that was why he was always fun to be around in a way. A total ball buster, you know.
Oh, that's
I feel like that energy comes across in the performance and the writing in this movie. There's sort of like an infectiousness, you know, that you just get a sense that you see. It's almost in a way I don't mean this as an insult, but in a lot of ways, because there's so much fourth wall breaking, it's almost like a non-performance. You almost feel watching this movie like you're just watching him riff at times.
I mean, it is.
Yeah.
He is that guy, and he is that guy on screen. I met him, not Carmen was Joe. It wasn't like meeting anybody else. It was wild. Yeah, he wasn't acting.
I mean, we really got to celebrate a genuine original voice coming out of here. I mean,
but then you can go on and look at those other movies that they made for Full Moon, like did you guys even look at the trailer for Galactic Gigolo?
No, I haven't yet. I figured like that might be on the list. I'm not sure how much Wizard Video we're actually going to cover going forward, because like so many of them are just, like I said, are just pickups, but that one seems to have their actual fingerprints on it.
That's Urban Classics.
That's Urban Classics. Yeah.
Part of the whole other series of great films, Slave Girls from Beyond Infinity,
which we definitely are covering. So yeah, that would fall under the umbrella.
Assault of the Killer Bimbos, which was a thing where that name was also once attached to Cemetery High, which is the next movie that they made after Galactic Gigolo. So they get deep into that Charles Band family for a while there.
And these are movies like you mentioned, Assault of the Killer Bimbos, and like, so a lot of these are films, and again, some of the ones that we named that were Carmine Capobianco and Gorman Bechard movies were ones that somehow eluded me. But something like Assault of the Killer Bimbos, like that was 100%. That was a USA Up All Night.
Yeah.
I know I saw that one on Up All Night probably multiple times.
Well, that was a big, Joe Bob was a big fan of that one too, and he supported that one. That one got better distribution than all those other movies for sure.
And it's a catchy title. You have to admit. It's a catchy title.
Band is the king of the title.
Absolutely is.
I heard stories that you know what I'm talking about, where he would have the deck of cards. The deck of cards story. Just putting art and titles together and go for it. Insane.
We love covering that stuff, because some weird things will come out of that. Like, I think of the Subspecies series. It was just a poster of a bunch of little guys carrying a woman away, and so the whole franchise is named after these little guys that disappear after the first movie.
We were talking about editing earlier. I was hoping to go through a whole Charles Band Full Moon episode without talking about little guys.
You would have been the first. You would have been the first person.
Really trying to.
I'm sorry. Oh man, that's me. That's me.
We almost named the show Tiny Terrors.
It would have been a good one too.
Yeah, what is that about?
Matt, I'm thinking with Psychos in Love here. It is sort of it's thin in the sense of premise and stuff like that. It's not short on amazing funny scenes and really intriguing and interesting creative swings that they take in the movie. But I'm like thinking about it now, and it's like I don't really know where we go from here. I feel like we sort of exhausted it, and I'm glad that we did it with you, because it's been amazing having you telling us some of these anecdotes about Carmine, and being somebody who's so involved with just underground video and cult stuff like that. I just knew, like, I'm glad that when you picked this movie, I thought to myself, there's got to be a reason. Like, we floated a couple other titles around before, and then when you said, can I talk about Psychos in Love? I went, oh yeah, sure. I looked at the spreadsheet, it was there, moved it up. And I'm so glad that you did, because it was the perfect movie to have you on to talk about. And it was a perfect little digression from the types of stuff we've been hitting on the show. It kind of felt, I mean, it did fit under the umbrella, but it kind of felt like we branched out and we were doing something off script and something a little bit different. And I just wanted to ask you before we go, is there anything that you want to plug in terms of any Visual Vengeance screenings that you have coming up or any cool events at Forbidden Planet. Now, this episode isn't going to air for a month or so. So if it's something over the next like couple of weeks, it'll probably have passed already. But is there anything that like is coming up in the reasonably near future that you want to plug, and also just tell people where they can find you and all of your work if they look to seek you out on the internet?
But I just, I do want to say that Psychos in Love is that type of movie, the type of movie that does not fit in a box. It is kind of like cheating. We're not really, it doesn't really fit within the Full Moon catalog. It doesn't really fit within horror or comedy, but it's the type of movie that once you see, you're going to fall in love with. Give it a chance. I'm a big backer of this one. And I'm out there doing this type of stuff with tons of movies. I always put my name behind the stuff that I talk about. So yeah, please come out and support the Visual Vengeance series. It's the third Thursday of every month at Nighthawk, Williamsburg, unless Brooklyn Horror, what do they call that? Film Festival, which is a really fun, cool, big film festival, rents out the whole theater and rents out our spot, so they have a budget and we're the little guy, so we get bumped. Or maybe who somebody else does. I think one of those famous people rented it out and bumped us another time. It happens. But the third Thursday of every month, hopefully at Nighthawk Cinema, you should go to google.com and put those words in, and maybe you'll find out about something that we're doing, or just follow HorrorBoobs on various social media platforms. And that's about all I can say as far as plugging stuff.
Yeah, definitely follow Matt on his social media at HorrorBoobs. You'll see a lot of the amazing stuff about Visual Vengeance and anything else that's going on Forbidden Planet. I know it's sort of not really like time appropriate because of when this episode is going to air, but I know there's a lot of cool events coming up with people over the next few weeks, and so there's always people coming in.
Yeah, this is going to be the last episode of 2023. This is going to be coming out around the 29th. So you'll have the whole suite of January to look forward to. And yeah, again, thank you for bringing this movie to our attention. I feel like we've, over the course of the show, I think we've found, I would say, 3 movies that have a really untapped cult fan base that is just kind of waiting to happen. I think this is one of them. Shrunken Heads and Blood Dolls are also kind of in that same. These are movies with cult audiences like waiting to happen, and I hope people discover them.
Who did Shrunken Heads with you?
We did that with Grady Hendrix, with the author.
Wow. Fun.
It was awesome.
And that movie is wild.
It's really so wild.
Doing that was the thing. Picking movies. I wanted to do Enemy Territory for so long. We kept talking about it. It's a total banger and totally outside of the box as far as a Charles Band movie. Just like that other one, Walking the Edge, which I really love. All these movies would be really fun to talk about. You guys are so lucky to be able to keep doing this. And I'm not even talking about the little people movies, which are also great. They're also great.
They really are. And so, guys, if you've been enjoying all of the Tiny Terrors or otherwise that we've been talking about, then jump on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you're listening and drop us a 5-star rating and maybe a short review if you're so inclined. You can follow the show on Instagram at _puppetmasters_castle_freaks. You can follow me at _Giallo_Jerry or Steve at Minotaur Matador. We're also on all the other social media platforms. There's a Facebook group. We're on X, Threads, Blue Sky. So just if you like what we do and you want to follow us on social media, we're very easy to find. We are not the only show, though, where you can hear Steve's lovely voice. So where else can people find you, Steve?
Well, you can also find me over at Cinemarcade. That's all one word, cinema and arcade mashed together, because that is what we talk about. We are talking about movies, and then we're watching a movie and then playing the video game based off of it, and comparing, contrasting, and finding all the different ways that they complement or do not complement one another. It's been a lot of fun. We're doing a whole month of Christmas movies right now that should be wrapping up. I think you'll be hearing Home Alone 2 the same day that you're hearing this one. Wrapping up that little series. And then we're going to have a bunch of weird, fun ones in January that I'm excited to get into. So definitely come back for that. And be sure to come back here next week, because we're very excited to talk about another movie from the classic heyday of Full Moon from 1992, I believe. We're going to be talking about Bad Channels. Bad Channels, a movie that looks like a lot of fun. I have not seen it yet myself.
Love Bad Channels. It's like the sister to TerrorVision.
Oh, amazing. I love TerrorVision.
It's like TerrorVision through the radio waves.
Yeah. It's a fun one. It's one that I've seen before, and I'm super excited too, because if you are a fan of horror and horror podcasts, and if you happen to be from the UK or be up on the UK horror scene, our guest for that episode is the amazing Becky Dark, who is a really terrific British like writer and critic, journalist, blogger, podcaster. She's fantastic, and she's excited to talk about Bad Channels, and we're excited to have her. So definitely stick around and check us out next week for Bad Channels.
So the last week you were like, stick around next week for the sleaziest, dumpiest dude we've had on the show yet. Straight from the,
I think you listened.
Straight from the sewers of New York City.
Well, that's what we need. Is we need someone to we need a little bit of everything in this show for it to work. So yeah, from the sleaziest to dumpiest man from the sewers of New York City to an amazing.
I just want to say to you guys have to get Mark Polonia. He worked for Full Moon for a while. You guys have to talk to Sam Irving. Have you talked to him?
Oh, we have.
Yeah, we sure have.
Awesome. He's so
great guy.
What about are you guys going to talk to William Shatner?
I would love to talk to William Shatner.
Kidding.
Come on, are you kidding?
No,
yeah.
J.R. Bookwalter. You got to talk to J.R. Bookwalter too. He's a big part of all the real, like, shot on video world of Charles Band, which is something that's not really a big deal, or like, I don't know, that whole world is really cool. And some of the connections that the shot on video world has to Charles Band's world, and the fact that he gave tons of people work that made movies outside of his system is a big deal. So definitely get those guys on if you can.
Well, I'm glad you said that, Matt, because one last thing I'll say to the listeners before we sign off is that one thing that, we've been doing the show for a little while now, but it's still relatively new. And we've been, booking guests of people we've been excited to talk to, or people who've expressed interest. But one avenue that we're going to be looking at a little more as the show goes on is definitely contacting more people directly involved in the movies. So we're definitely looking at some of the IMDb credits of some of them to see if there are, writers, directors, actors, and crew members who are, available and wanting to talk. So we're always taking suggestions from people. Like if you know people who you think would want to be on the show and talk about a Full Moon or Empire project that they worked on, puppetmasterscastlefreaks@gmail.com. We will be taking lots of names for people to reach out to. So it's actually kind of funny you brought that up now, because that's kind of what our mission statement going forward is, to talk to more people directly involved. Well, Matt, thank you so much, and we will see you guys next week for Bad Channels.
Walked into my life one night. At first I thought you'd be like all the rest. Boring to talk to and boring in bed. In general and all around pest. I was all set to cut you to little bitty bits. Chop you, dice you, slice you, drill with your bits. You turn my life around with your beauty and scent. And all I did was kiss you once and go straight to heaven I went. Said all I did was kiss you once and go straight to heaven I went. 'Cause I'm a psycho in love, I can't help myself. Psycho in love, I'm a psycho in love. Never felt this way about anyone else.
Joe, my dear, I guess that we can call it fate.
Sure, I'll kill more girls, be faithful to you.
And I will slice up many a man.
Love each other so, we're just so doggone happy.
We're sick, we're crazy, we're lunatics, not fit for society.
So we're sick, we're crazy, we're lunatics, not fit for society. Cause we are psychos in love, we can't help ourselves. Psychos in love, we are psychos in love. Never felt this way about anyone else, we are psychos. Psychos in love, cause we are psychos in love, we can't help ourselves. Psychos in love, we are